Hello, my name is Ivan Smirnov. Welcome back to Getting Started with Generative AI in Research. We have already discussed that LLM and other generative AI tools can be very useful in your research. And in this last part of the course, we'll be talking about why you still have to be careful when using these tools. There are many dimensions to this question, and we will start with authorship and accountability. So when ChatGPT was released, researchers immediately started to use it in their writing. So there was an interesting paper that investigated how the frequency of certain words changed since the launch of ChatGPT. And for example, you can see that for the word delves, there was like a huge increase in frequency. And that is because ChatGPT kind of likes this word and use it frequently. And so that was a sign of many researchers just copy-pasting some content from ChatGPT. So if you are wondering how large is this increase, it was larger than increase in COVID-related terms. So if you remember, when COVID came, a lot of research activity was concentrated on COVID, and there was faster review processes that were established to allow faster dissemination of findings about COVID. So there was obviously a spike in COVID-related terms, but this was like nothing compared to the word delves that was, appeared after release of ChatGPT. And what was also interesting, I think, in this paper is that they also show that it's was least prevalent for English-speaking countries like UK, Australia, USA, and also it was more prevalent in journals that's kind of borderline predatory, like Frontiers and DPI. And I think this figure actually tells us two important things regarding the use of large language models in writing. One is that in one sense, it can be a great equalizer. So it can help these people who are not native English speaker to improve their writing and to be more competitive with speakers who are native English speakers. On the other side, we can see that it also can be used, just to produce a very bad content. So we have to be really careful about that. And if you are going to publish something, you have to check publisher policies. So, for example, initially there were some authors who decided it's a good idea to include ChatGPT as a co-author of their paper, but people quickly realized it's actually kind of stupid idea. So, and now all publishers explicitly saying that large language models just cannot be used as co-authors because they just simply does not satisfy authorship criteria. What is allowed for you to do is to use AI for kind of proofreading and light editing of your manuscripts. And recently, Springer Nature decided that you don't even need to declare it. So their policy for some time was that in whatever way you use AI, you have to always declare it. But now they say, if it's just for AI-assisted copy editing, it doesn't need to be declared. But you have to be careful because some other publishers, they still say that, where AI tools are used, it has to be acknowledged and documented appropriately. So always check the policies. So it could be that the journal, if you use AI for proofreading, it could be that the journal actually require you to disclose it. And also, even if it's allowed, it doesn't mean, I think, that you should blindly just, use it without thinking twice, because there can be some markers of use of AI, for example, overuse of the word delves. And this could lead for reputational consequences for you. Even if it's formally not forbidden, then, if other researchers see that your language is really ChatGPT-ish, they might, think that you are, not careful enough with your writing. And so it could be a reputational damage for you. So please be really careful with that. And unfortunately, some researchers was not careful, but they were just, using GenAI to just completely generate their papers. So there was this example of a retracted paper. And if you look carefully at the introduction, the very first sentence, it say certainly here is a possible introduction for your topic. So it seems that they not only used GenAI to generate a paper, but they just, even were lazy enough to delete these things that's usually, generated by things like ChatGPT. And there was also a funny example when people were just Googling the phrase as a large language model, I cannot do something. That was like a standard phrase that ChatGPT was giving, and they were looking at it in scientific papers, and they have found a lot of scientific papers. So a lot of people were not only generated content for their papers with tools like ChatGPT, but they were lazy to hide it or to remove it. And there was another example of retracted papers that use this illustration, which was also it's immediately clear that it is GenAI generated, and like it doesn't even have like a proper text, like some really weird artifacts instead of text. And I think that these examples often used like to scare all of us, or like now we will be flooded with this kind of nonsensical papers. So I think these worries are a bit exaggerated, and the reason is because kind of it's not a new problem. So there is, for example, was a phenomenon known as tortured phrases. So this appears when people trying to plagiarize other texts, but then they wanted to avoid this text to be detected by automatic tools. So what they do, they usually, again, automatically substitute words to its synonyms in order, to avoid automatic plagiarism detection. And it's in some sentences it could work, but when it comes like to technical terms, it's become like nonsensical. So, for example, artificial intelligence becomes counterfeit consciousness, or like breast cancer become boson peril, which is like ridiculous. And even like the first computer-generated paper was accepted to a conference in as early as 2005. So this was the paper, and I think you can quickly see that it's kind of nonsensical, and it's easily detectable that it's automatically generated. So, and the first question that arises when you see such papers, like when you see the papers when authors like even were lazy enough to remove to change like the very first sentence of their paper, the very first question that arises is like, where were peer reviewers? So when it's become apparent that no one actually was reviewing this paper, because any half-decent reviewer would immediately read the first sentence of a paper and see, okay, this is like nonsense. Or if anyone would be looking at this paper, he or she would be immediately able to recognize that this is just like a nonsense, not a scientific illustration. So the problem is that there's predatory journals, there is this kind of low quality research, but it's not something that's is entering mainstream science. So I never read these journals. If I read this journal, I would never cite this paper because it's obviously nonsensical, and and then I would also look like these authors, and I will remember not to invite them to any event, to any conference, because I know that they're doing a scientific misconduct. So I think this might be a bit, these fears might be a bit overestimated. And misconduct is a problem in science, and we should, fight it. But I think because science is a reputation-based institute, that still protect us to a large extent, and I don't think that, highly qualified and reputable researchers really would be copy-pasting things from GenAI. So I don't think it's an actual problem. And then, once you started to see this automatically generated text, you started to think, is it possible to detect them? Maybe we should just, run an algorithm and just screen everything, and we will solve all our problems thanks to that. And unfortunately, it's not so easy. So there was a paper that investigated how well common tools can detect GenAI-generated content. And what they also did, they also tried to see what if we, not directly copy-paste text, but apply some automatic changes to this. And what they found out, for example, these changes can be something like aiding spelling errors. So the baseline accuracy was 23.9 for GPT-4 model. So it's already kind of pretty poor accuracy, right? You don't want to, filter out things when your accuracy is actually only 23%, 24%. Then if you had, for example, spelling errors, then the accuracy dropped to 16%, which is a reduction of 7.3%. And the most successful intervention was increasing complexity. And if you increase complexity, then accuracy drops to 2.1%. So it's almost zero. And if you look at how they did this increased complexity, they again just asked ChatGPT just to change the text, and they use the following prompt. So they say, rewrite the following passage to significantly enhance the linguistic complexity. So if you wanted, to cheat, you can just generate a text, then run another prompt, and with this updated text, it will be detectable only in like 2.1% of cases. And also, I think in some sense this battle is already lost. There's probably not a real chance to detect automatically generated text unless it's like kind of very straightforward copy pasting. And also there was concerns because some research indicated that for non-native speakers, the detection is kind of high in the sense that actual real text are more often flagged as AI generated, which of course raises another concern. So probably it's already kind of impossible to detect AI generated text, especially if there is some manual edits. And there were also interesting studies that were trying to see how well humans can actually detect AI, for example, in images. So in this paper, they use 3 different styles of images, and they asked, they have human-generated content. You can see it here, and then they also ask different AI models to generate images. So what they have found is that automatic detection works really well. So it's a bit different from text because in images it's actually quite easy to detect what is generated. So the worst performance was 90%, and some tools with some AI models can have performance as large as 100%. But it's interesting, if humans can detect this. And what they have found that actually performance for humans was much, much lower. So for some styles, it was as low as 55%, if it's sketch drawing. They also was asking this question not only just to general public, but also to professionals. So it also was kind of interesting to see that professionals are much better in detecting AI generated images. For example, for this fantasy genre, it was almost 20% high accuracy, but you can see that even professionals are performing quite poorly, 66% is not very good performance with a baseline of 50%. So probably in some time there would be even harder or even maybe impossible to detect very well created AI generated images. So now I actually want you to pause the video for some time and just trying to say which one of these 2 images are generated by AI. So one of these images is generated by AI, another is not. So what would be your guess? Okay, so I hope that if you wanted to answer this question, you had time to pause the video. Also, if you wanted to check how well you can detect images like that, I recommend you to go to this blog post. I think you can just Google it, how did you do on the AI art Turing test? And you will find this test. It was created by Scott Alexander. So he manually selected images that he think would be hard to distinguish from each other and asked, I think, 11,000 people to do this. So the left image was Gen AI, and the right image was Paul Gauguin's image. So if you were right, congratulations. If you were wrong, then you're not the only one. So interestingly, this image was more often rated as AI-generated image by survey respondents than any of the actually AI-generated images in this particular style. So there was images in different style, and this impressionism, for some reason, was the hardest for humans to detect. They often assume that this is human-generated, even if it was just AI-generated content. So if you are curious, then this is the image that was most often rated as human-generated, even though it's AI-generated image. So yeah, you can spend some time to see, it's pretty nice for AI-generated image, right? And this is image that was most often rated as AI-generated, even though it's created by a human artist. So you can imagine that for humans, they might assume that this style of pictures is more often AI-generated, and this is more often human generated, but those of this test, he actually balanced the images in different styles. So there was like equal number of AI and non-AI images. And overall performance was around like 60% on this test. So it was still better than chance, but you can see that humans are really bad in detecting images that are generated by AI. So this was about images, but returning to text, there was also an interesting paper that we were checking if humans can detect poetry generated by AI. And they have two parts of experiments. One was just about detecting if it's a human, and it turns out that humans cannot actually do it. And the second experiment was even more interesting because they were also asking survey respondents to assess the quality of the poetry, and they do it like an experimental way. So some people were told that it is actually AI, some people were told that this is human, and some people were told nothing. And they can be told that it is AI even if it's not an AI, even if it's a human generated poetry. And this plot was actually created by another person, not the authors of the paper, but using the data from the paper. So it was shared on Twitter, and I think it's a nice plot that showing you, for example, one interesting thing is that AI generated poetry was actually rated higher than human-generated poems. So you can see that this is like regardless of if they were told that this is AI-generated or human-generated, all these things are higher than these things. So you can say that because I was asked to generate something in the style of Whitman, and maybe people prefer Whitman to Shakespeare, but I think that even with these limitations, it's still like exciting result, right? Because it doesn't matter that it was generated in the style of Whitman, it's still like a very classic poetry, and the fact that it was less preferred to Gen AI generated poems is quite surprising. You can also see that if you are told that this is AI, then your quality kind of assessment immediately drops, which is again kind of remarkable that if you think that this is a human, you would like say that this quality is good in 62%, but if you say that it's not Elliot but AI, it kind of drops almost by 20%. So I think we started with these examples when people were like creating like nonsense with AI, like nonsensical image, and putting scientific paper or creating like nonsensical text, and now we discovered that it's actually possible to create poetry that will be indistinguishable by human raters, and then it's possible to create images that would be indistinguishable by human raters. And all this raises interesting questions about what it means to be an author of something, even if we cannot detect if it's like a human or not, what it means. And also we just covered actually a simple case where it was like a purely AI generated content, but you can imagine that in most real cases it actually would be like a cooperation. For example, I use AI to help me with my writing, but I never just copy paste things. I just always start with my own draft, and then I listen to AI suggestions, and then I might incorporate them, might not, and there are always a lot of iterations. So I'm working with the text as I would usually work on my own, like writing, rewriting. Now there's just AI in a loop, but there's nothing like I don't copy paste paragraphs or even sentences from my content, so it's even like harder to understand what's my contribution and what's not. And so some authors suggest that maybe we should kind of even like forget a bit about this kind of authorship idea of something like authorship is something that I created completely on my own, and this is very valuable because we were able to automate writing and also like image creating. So maybe we should like reconsider how we think about authorship, and maybe we should move from authorship to something that can be called transferability. And the idea is like if we create something and if we make it public, then what's important is that we are able to answer for this and we take responsibility for what we are creating, because it can affect other people. So yeah, it's an interesting space. We'll see what will happen, but I hope that you now have something to think about when you're thinking about if you should use an AI or if should other people use AI in your writing or image creation. Yeah, that's all. I see you in next videos.